And welcome back, everybody. This is another episode of From the Pocket coming at you on a Monday. And we're out here continuing our draft coverage. We got really like 4 weeks left until the NFL draft happens. April 23rd is coming quick. Very excited. A lot to do, but I also feel like this period of time just probably drags on longer than it needs to. I feel like you could easily have the draft in like early April and all would be fine, but it is what it is. They tried to push it a few years ago to like May or something, and it just broke everything and made everything ridiculous, and they said, okay, we can't do that again. So I guess April 23rd is, that kind of late, mid-ish April is probably what we're going to get for the foreseeable future. But I did want to talk about the episode today and give a little bit of a better, more clear breakdown on what we have going on the channel over the next few weeks. So full disclosure, I fully expected to probably come in here and do some type of prospect breakdown, the top 10 linebackers, edge rushers, what have you, but I'm not plugged into college football in that way, to that degree. I don't have access to film, to tape of college players. NFL, I can go textbook, verse deep. I can do whatever you want to do on that. I watch film on that. I study the analytics. I have a very well-rounded view of basically everything that goes on in the NFL, down to like the position groups and depth chart of basically every team. That is not the case when it comes to scouting and kind of knowing what a player is good at, what traits are going to be able to carry over from college to the NFL. That's just not an area that I am near as familiar with compared to a lot of the people out there, right? Your Dane Bruglers, the Stock Exchange podcast on PFF. There's a number of different ones. So Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks come to mind. So I did not want to weigh into that because I just don't think there's any value in you coming to me for that information, right? Like that's just, you should just go to the people that actually study that for a living and understand it. That's just not me. That's not my lane. It never is. It never will be. So instead, I kind of wanted to break things down in a way that I thought could be interesting and informative, but more maybe from the lens of the NFL perspective rather than the prospect. So kind of the other piece to that puzzle, if you will. And what we have today is I wanted to go through what I think are the 10 most interesting questions going into the draft, whether that is about prospects, position groups, individual teams, what they're going to do, things of that nature. And then the episode on Thursday is going to go over concerns, right? Concerns that I have, not necessarily mistakes that I think a team could make, but just concerns saying like, hey, if a team does this or this happens, or we're trying to frame something in this way, I would be maybe a little concerned about what that would look like long term. So we're going to get into that, and then throughout the rest of it up until the draft. Obviously, the Monday before the draft, we'll do the mock, our final first-round mock, and then Thursday night is going to be a live stream of the draft itself and covering and reacting to every pick in real time. The couple of weeks in between this week and that, I want to go through and talk about hidden gems, players that I really have come to love going through the process, and just players that I'm kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, maybe calling my shot on, saying I really think this player could be something special in the NFL, or at least better than their draft stock may indicate, right? Those third-round picks, fourth-round picks, those day 2, day 3 picks. And then I also did want to try, and if Christian's on board, I wanted to maybe have an episode where we just go over the basics. If you are somebody who is trying to plug in right before the draft and you're just trying to learn what you need to know, an episode just to go over really quick, here are the top prospects, here's how the draft is shaping out, here's what the team needs are, just kind of a broad overview of, if you don't learn anything else before draft night, here's what you kind of need to know, kind of a cheat sheet. And I have a couple other ideas floating around. I maybe wanted to do an episode where I just react to mock drafts and talk about why I do or don't like that. I also maybe might do a second mock draft before my official one that's more angled towards what I think teams should do. I don't know if I'll combine that with the other episode, but there's still some stuff left to be sorted, but I just kind of wanted to give you a rundown of how I'm going to approach the next few weeks. I want to stay in my lane, but I also want to give you some informative content on the draft that I don't think you could maybe get from other people, at least not the way I'm presenting it. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have 10 questions today, the 10 most interesting questions going into this draft, in my opinion. And to me, as I'm doing my research, as I'm learning about the prospects, as I'm just doing my normal rounds on the NFL and reading what teams are up to. These are, to me, the questions that are always coming up that really, I feel like, could indicate a lot about what our takeaway from this draft is. And I'm starting out this, actually, with the first question being about a specific prospect, Arvell Reese. And the age-old question, what position is Arvell Reese going to play? I genuinely, I think, from everything I know, and there are people who know a lot more about this than I do, but I feel like this is kind of the consensus around people who know a lot about this. It feels to me like Arvell Reese could very well go number 2. And the idea around it is, well, but we love his physical skill set and we can turn him into an elite edge rusher. Because that's why, if you're taking Arvell Reese at number 2 to be your outside linebacker, you probably missed a pick. You know what I mean? Like, you probably should not be taking Arvell Reese at number 2 if you're taking him as an outside linebacker. But I also think, I'm like, okay, but if you're going to take him at number 2, make him an edge rusher, I'd rather just go with a pure edge rusher. I'd rather go with a David Bailey or a Reuben Bain at 2 then. And I'm really curious to see how that is going to look, because the Jets are going to be telling you a lot if they take Arvell Reese. If they don't take Arvell Reese, that is the Jets telling you. I think they would go edge rusher in that case. That is the Jets telling you they do not believe Arvell Reese can be a comparative edge rusher like a David Bailey, like a Reuben Bain, maybe even an Akeem Messidor, right? Now, that also, I don't think Arvell Reese would fall very far. I think the Titans could easily pick him up at 4. There's a few teams along the way. He's not going to fall out of the top 7 at most, I think. I think that is as far as he can possibly fall. But I think it's very interesting to see what will become of Arvell Reese and whether or not a team will actually take him with the intention of making him an edge rusher, or if they're going to let him live as that really versatile linebacker piece that I think he can be. He can be an excellent Sam. He can be an excellent Will. I think if you're gonna draft him and make him line up as an edge rusher in a 4-3 defense, I don't think that that's going to work, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen. So that is, to me, a very interesting question. Getting to my second question here, I am so curious, and again, this maybe we'll do a few teams here, because a lot of these questions center around specific teams. I am so curious to know what the Rams are going to do with their mid-round first pick. We know that the Rams in previous years have been very interested in those splash players, right? They wanted the Brock Bowers. They have wanted various players that, like, they're not your meat and potatoes players, right? They're not the trenches. They're not edge rushers necessarily. They have ended up taking some of those players, but I am curious if, like, a Kenyon Sadiq could land here for the Rams. I do think it's very plausible Kenyon Sadiq does fall to them, and given how much they ran 13 personnel, they did spend a second on Terrence Ferguson last year, right? But I think it's very plausible that given the fact that they ran so much 13 last year, you could get a Kenyon Sadiq, still easily justify running 13 personnel. And, Terrence Ferguson is your second best tight end at a 13 personnel behind Kenyon Sadiq. Like, that is a scary offense still. So I really do like the idea of them doing that. They might spend it on a receiver, but I kind of expect them to maybe go a little flashier here. I don't think they'll take an edge rusher and just bury him and say, hey, we'll let you develop. I don't think they'll take – they're not going to take a linebacker. Sean McVay and Les Snead are just – they do not believe in linebackers for whatever reason. And I don't think they take a secondary piece. They don't really need one at this point, given all the moves they've made in free agency. So to me, this is really pointing towards the Rams taking a splash player, a receiver, maybe a Kenyon Sadiq. God forbid if Jeremiah Love falls to them, they might take Jeremiah Love, like something like that. I don't think that'll happen, but yeah, I think what the Rams do here could be very interesting because they're really, I mean, a team picking as high as them, like it's like you really don't have any need. So what are you building towards? Are you building towards the future? Are you just looking to like capitalize this roster as it stands right now? Like what are you trying to do here? I think it's very interesting what the Rams do. And we'll stick with the team trend, right? We'll go with the Cowboys next. Very curious to see what the Cowboys do. They are one of, I believe, 4 teams off the top of my head, maybe 5 actually. What is it? The Cowboys, Jets, Browns, Dolphins, and the Rams don't. Yeah, the Cowboys. Geez, I'm sorry, I'm doing this on the top of my head. The Chiefs. So the Chiefs, Browns, Jets, Cowboys, Dolphins. All 5 of those teams have multiple first-round picks. So you can kind of throw that group together. I was going to also talk about the Chiefs, but like very curious to know what these teams with multiple first round picks, or even like the Jets who have 3 next year as well, whether or not there's an interest in one of them trading up or something and trying to pair their picks together to get maybe instead of like 2 really solid players going to get that blue chip player. My favorite player in this draft, just in terms of who I think is the best player, not necessarily the most valuable player, but the best player is Sonny Styles. I love Sonny Styles. I have spent so much time watching him, watching his tape. He's easily one of the 15 players I have seen the most of. And, I mean, he honestly might even be easily like in the top 3, just how much time I've spent watching him. He is just a freak of nature specimen. He is so good at what he does. He plays linebacker. Also came from being a safety. Just I could rave about Sonny Styles for forever. As a Cowboys fan, as you see the helmet behind me, I would love it if the Cowboys, I would not hate it at all if they traded the 12th and the 20th to move up to like 6 or something and take a Sonny Styles if he is still there, if he somehow gets out of the top 5, which he may not. I don't know. But I would love that. I also just, in terms of staying on Dallas, I think they could. They're going to have to take 2 players on the defensive side of the ball with their picks. And then getting into the other teams, the Browns and the Jets are really interesting because they both have picks in the top 6, right? They both have second picks in the first round, kind of in that mid part of the draft. I wonder if they are good landing spots for a Ty Simpson, right? You go and spend that first pick, your premier pick, on that blue chip player, build your team out. And then that second pick, maybe instead of saying, let's continue to build out our nucleus, maybe you say, hey, what if we just take a stab at a Ty Simpson and see what happens? Like, I think that could be a really interesting prospect for them. So again, I don't think the Jets or the Browns are going to be interested in trading up or anything. If anything, I think they would trade out. But very interesting to think about these teams that do have quarterback needs, but have high-level picks that they don't necessarily have to spend it on the second quarterback in this draft class. They can come back later and get that and still have good value with what they did in the first round, even if Ty Simpson doesn't work out. So I think that's a pretty interesting question. And we'll go ahead and just stick with the Chiefs, and then we'll move to Miami. And honestly, that's actually going to knock out a bunch of these questions immediately. So the Chiefs first. 2 first-round picks. I think first off, just to dispel 2 things. One, they're not getting Jeremiah Love. Okay, if Jeremiah Love falls to them, I don't think they're going to go get Jeremiah Love. I don't think Jeremiah Love will fall to them, but I'm seeing some people say if Jeremiah Love makes it to 9, the Chiefs are definitely going to take him. No. Maybe they would have if they hadn't signed Kenneth Walker, but they signed Kenneth Walker, I believe, because they did not know, or they have it on good authority that, Jeremiah Love ain't making it to you. You need to address your running back need another way, because Jeremiah Love is not going to be the way you can do it. So if somehow, some way he does fall to them, and same thing with the Saints. I think the Saints did the exact same thing with Travis Etienne. So just to dispel that, they're not taking Jeremiah Love even if he's there. And the second thing, I'm not saying they won't do this. I would just be very surprised if they did. I don't think they're taking a lineman. I think they believe they have a good line set, and they have so many needs on the defensive side that I think that, and even in the receiving core, that I think that is where they're going to try to address their needs. Now, that said, I could see an argument where it's like, okay, well, we have 4 guys we really like, and we have a 5th that, maybe not, who knows, right? If you go and draft a lineman in the top 10, you get maybe one of the 2 best linemen. You still maybe get the best lineman you have graded if only one guy is taken off the board, right? Like if you have that second guy and that's actually your top, you could easily justify taking him. But I could see the argument if you're like, if we get this guy, we really insulate ourselves from injuries, right? Because you're going to have a guy, maybe even 2 guys, who get hurt throughout the season. And if you have that guy you've drafted, you had Josh Simmons last year you drafted, if you take the other guy, you really do a better job of insulating yourself against injury. So I could see that. Again, not saying it won't happen, but I don't think it will. I think they will spend this pick ideally on an edge rusher. If there's no value at edge, which, again, David Bailey, Arvell Reese, if you want to make him an edge rusher, Ruben Bain, I think all of those players are going to be gone. I think if one of them falls to the Chiefs, they might go that route. I think what they're probably going to do if the edge is not there, they're going to spend the 9th pick on the receiver. I think there's a good chance that you're going to have a plethora of your pick of the litter at receiver. I think that is probably where they would go to try to bolster up that offense even further. Their receiving situation is just so perilous right now, and I think adding one would go a long way for their offense. And not only that, but I know a Mansour Delane would be a really popular pick here. I don't think they would feel the need to spend that pick on Mansour Delane. And the reason I don't think so is because they have the 29th pick. And I think there is still some real value at cornerback, even if they want to wait till the 29th pick to take a cornerback, right? Even if once you get past Mansour Delane, you still have a Jermod McCoy, which I'm a little iffy on because he's coming off of an ACL tear, so maybe he's off your board. But an Avion Terrell would be a perfect player for them. He's a little smaller, but he would go perfectly in that slot position. He would be a great replacement for Trent McDuffie, who you just lost. Or you could even go with, I think it's probably the second best corner in this draft behind Mansour Delane, a Colton Hood. A Colton Hood would be awesome. He would be a fantastic pick at 29, I think. So, I think that there are a lot of options at corner. And not to say this isn't a deep receiver class. This is a deep receiver class, and you can get value at receiver even at 29. But I think I would rather have one of the 2 best receivers in this draft class and take my chances taking one of the 5 best corners in this draft later on in the first round. So that's what I think they will do. And then maybe in that second round pick, because they pick high again in the second round, right? They're basically picking in the top 43 times. That's when you go get your edge rusher and continue to bolster up that front 7. So I think they have a lot of flexibility, but I am curious to see what they do and what they prioritize, because there is a lot of areas you could, in theory, prioritize. And who knows? And the last team I wanted to talk about, this is the last team, the Miami Dolphins. I am very curious to see what the Miami Dolphins do. They have 7 picks in the top 100. This is the most of any team in the past 15 years, I believe. It's tied for the most. I think the Cardinals a couple years ago had 7 picks, and it did not go very well for them. You have some teams like the Lions back in the 23 draft, I believe, had 6 in the top 100, and those first 4 were, it was Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Sam Laporta, and Brian Branch. Those were their first 4 picks. So, that is a nucleus right there. That is, you talk about building the nucleus, those players are all glue players for what the Lions do today. that is the kind of impact you can bring to your roster with the amount of draft capital they have. But, there are teams that you look at who have just totally missed across the board on basically every single pick when they've had 6 picks, 5 picks in the top 100. So the Dolphins, it's fun to think about the potential, but you actually have to realize that potential. And I'm very curious to see if the Dolphins actually can do that. If they hit it, I mean, the Dolphins are on track. They're going to have good draft capital or a good salary cap space next year. They're going to, in theory, have a young nucleus going into year 2. You could start to see the Dolphins, if they hit this draft, turn things around very quickly. So to me, what direction they go, who they prioritize, what those picks are, and how they develop them are one of the most interesting questions to me in this draft. Can they do it? And if they do, we're cooking. If they don't, boy, oh boy, this is the kind of draft that if you miss, this sets you back a couple more years. So a huge draft. Cannot understate how important it is for the Dolphins. We already did talk about we talked about Ty Simpson. I'll go ahead and just circle back and close the loop on that one. Again, I think it would be just very interesting to see if there is a team who's needing a quarterback with a couple of picks, maybe takes a stab at a Ty Simpson. I think to me that is the clearest path for Ty Simpson to go in the first round. I've seen some people mock. I think Charles Davis mocked Ty Simpson to the Cardinals, which that would be shocking to me. I would be thoroughly surprised by that. I will say this was the team that picked Josh Rosen at 10 and then came back a year later and said, yeah, never mind, we're taking Kyler Murray at 1. So, maybe this is an organization that is not afraid to take a stab at a quarterback and be wrong and go into next season with a deep quarterback class, at least in theory, right? That's what it's supposed to be, but it feels like it's supposed to be that every year. So that said, I would not like that. I would be kind of annoyed if they either need to take the best defensive player they can, they need to take an offensive lineman, or they need to trade out. That is what they need to do, unless they know something about Ty Simpson that I and everybody else don't, where they're just like, no, this guy is, if they love Ty Simpson that much, then do it. Okay, I'm not going to tell you not to, but if you're just taking Ty Simpson just to take him and you're wasting your 3rd overall pick to do it, I think that's a mistake. So maybe somebody trades up in the later first round to take him. I don't see that happening. I think the best bet for Ty Simpson is one of these teams that don't want to call it a throwaway pick, but you kind of have an extra pick in the middle of the round that it's like, yeah, you know what? We don't really like a lot of our value here. We can go ahead and just take Ty Simpson or trade out and see what happens. So very curious to see how that plays out. It's kind of a unique circumstance where there's just not a lot of quarterbacks in this draft that are worthy of spending a high pick on. But at the same time, you do have teams that have the draft capital and the need where it could kind of line up. So very interesting. I also wanted to talk about, again, a more broad topic, but implicating several teams, right? These teams with young quarterbacks. The Titans, the Giants, the Saints, right? These are all teams with 1st or 2nd year quarterbacks. Well, I guess really they're all 2nd year quarterbacks, the ones I just listed, but going into year 2, who really do need to prioritize helping them on the offensive side of the ball, right? And I'm curious to see if they do that. I think, again, I've talked about this a lot, but I really do think the Bears are a lesson that the rest of the league can pay attention to and learn from. This idea that, look, our defense is not going to be good this year. We can get by with scheme and maybe some nice takeaways, but ultimately what we need to do is surround our young quarterback with as much talent and help as possible. And that is going to be what helps set us up and catapults him into reaching his full potential, which has a cascading effect on the rest of your team and the rest of your franchise for years to come if you can get your quarterback to that level. Not saying I would hate the Saints or the Giants or the Titans for taking maybe the defensive player they have is the highest grade. Like if the Giants take Sonny Styles, they have a need at linebacker. I'm not going to hate it because I think Sonny Styles is an amazing player, but it will make me kind of question what is your game plan here? And again, that gets into this weird discussion about what the best strategy to draft is. Are you drafting the best player available? Are you drafting for future need? Are you drafting for current need? I don't want to be the guy that tells every team you should be drafting for your needs that you have right now. I don't want to be that guy, but I think it behooves these teams to understand you have a window with this young quarterback. You have to develop him and you have to maximize his rookie contract. And if you're not doing everything you can to help him on that side of the ball, I think you're missing the boat. So very curious to see what these teams do. In my ideal scenario, I think that the Titans, Giants, and the Saints all draft some type of offensive player. Maybe they're different. The Saints don't really need offensive line help, or the Titans and the Giants do. I'm not going to say which position group they should hit. I just want to see them prioritize the offense in some capacity. So I'm very curious to see what they do there. This is a defensive draft, and you have a lot of the blue chip talent at the top are defensive players. So, are you going to be able to ignore those blue chip defensive players, knowing it's ultimately going to help your quarterback long term, or are you going to say, I can't pass up on Sonny Styles at 5? I mean, he's the best player, one of the 2 best players in this draft, arguably. I got to take him. So just curious to see what those teams do in those situations. Also wanted to talk about potential trades. We're going to see trades. We see trades basically every single year. I don't know if we've ever not seen a trade happen, actually. Maybe once. But again, going back to the Cardinals, I think the Cardinals are a prime team to maybe trade back. I even could see the Browns maybe trading back. I think they need receiver and offensive line help, and they're in a prime position to get really their pick of the litter, I think, in any of those spots. Maybe not receiver if the Giants or the Titans take a receiver, but offensive line help is going to be there. Receivers are going to be there. They're going to be able to get the best player, probably their best graded player at either of those positions, or at least one of them. So I could see them trading back, though, collecting draft capital, knowing that next year they're going to probably try to take a big swing, similar with what the Jets are kind of doing with next year. They have 3 first-round picks. Are the Browns going to try to recoup picks and make a swing next year to move up and get a guy that they love in the top 3 or 4, assuming they're not already picking in the top 3 or 4, which they very well might be. But very curious to see what the trades look like. Wonder, again, we talked about the Rams at the top. Are the Rams a team that could trade? If we get to the 15th pick and they had 3 guys, they're like, we want one of these 3 guys, and none of those guys are there. Okay, well, let's just trade out then. Let's recoup some picks for next year and later on in this draft, build out some depth, maybe have some picks in the higher end of next year's round and call it a day. I think that would be an interesting thing to think about as well. So a lot of interesting ideas around who could be trading up and who could be trading out. I think it's just going to depend on the value there for each team. Okay. 2 more questions today, and then we'll go ahead and get out of here. We've already been talking 30 minutes. It's kind of crazy. So one quick thing I wanted to hit on. I'm curious if we're going to see a run in receivers in the top 10. It's a weird draft because the receiver talent in it's deep, but it's not high end, right? It's not, you don't have any blue chip guys that are just, this guy's going to step in and be one of the 8 best receivers in the league next year, right? It's guys that are good, not great. But at the same time, going back to some of the topics we've already talked about, in the top end of the draft, you have a lot of teams with those very specific receiver needs. So, this is not a Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., Roma Dunze level receiver draft. A few years ago, we saw all 3 of those guys go in the top 10. But, a Mekhi Lemon, a Carnell Tate, a Jordan Tyson, even an Omar Cooper Jr. There are, a Denzel Boston even, a Jeremy Bernard. There are several receivers who could easily go in the first round, and some of them even higher if if we start to see teams say, you know what, no, let's actually go receiver. Jeremiah Love falls off the board at 4, let's say. Maybe the Giants take a receiver. The Commanders could take a receiver. We've already talked about the Chiefs maybe taking a receiver. The Saints could take a receiver. I mean, who knows what the Browns are going to do? They could take a receiver. So, I know it's a little bit cheating because when you talk about the teams at the top of the draft, these are teams that typically have the most need. So it's like, of course, they would need receiver in addition to like 5 other things. But I think it is interesting because of the way a lot of these teams, again, going through them, the Commanders, the Saints, the Titans, even the Giants a little bit, like the way that they attacked free agency is really indicative that they are not trying to go into this draft needing defensive pieces. It really tells me that they're trying to go into this draft and attack it with some offensive blue chip talent. And even if maybe, you're like, well, I got Carnell Tate as like the 12th best player in this draft and I'm picking at 6, but he's the best receiver in the draft. Maybe you reach and take a receiver and that starts maybe a spawn of, well, okay, now I got to take Mekhi Lemon. Now I got to take Jordan Tyson. And you see maybe a run on some of these teams taking receivers as they start to fall off the board. So very curious. I don't know what's going to happen, but something to maybe just watch out for. I think it's a very interesting dilemma where, again, not a lot of high-end talent in the receiver room this year, but a lot of teams picking high that really do need them. And the last question, this is a big league kind of picture question. I'm just curious to see what is going to happen with it. How does what the Seahawks defense did this past season affect the way teams build their defense, right? And again, this is where Sonny Styles I think fits perfectly into this conversation because what teams are really wanting to do is they're looking for those Kyle Hamiltons now, those Nick Emanwaris, a player like Sonny Styles, which I know Sonny Styles is like a Mike linebacker, but again, he did play safety and he has the physical tools to really kind of put him wherever you might want to put him, including maybe have him line up in the nickel from time to time and defend players in the slot, or have him do all sorts of fun stuff, send him off the edge on a blitz. So I'm curious to see how that affects things, how teams tackle maybe taking corners, taking safeties, what kind of linebackers are they taking? Maybe this affects who takes Arvell Reese. Maybe they have a different vision for Arvell Reese in that way where it's like, hey, you probably have a harder time. Yeah, I'm kind of riffing here. I mean, you have a harder time probably putting him in the nickel, right? He's more of an off-ball kind of outside linebacker. But again, it's just curious to see how these teams let what the Seahawks did last year affect how maybe they want to attack building out their defenses. So, and really, again, that's where you get some of these situations where a team might surprise us and take a player that we're like, really? But it's because in their mind, they have a vision like, no, I can put this player here actually, and it totally changes the way my defense looks. So I am curious to see how that works. But that is all the questions. I know I said 10 questions. It came down to 10 questions. It's just we kind of tackled some of them together. But yeah, these are all things that I think are very interesting, things I think are worth watching going into this draft. So yeah, we'll be back on Thursday to talk about maybe some of my more concerns, right? Things that I think teams could do that concern me. But until next time, I love you. I cherish you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for rocking with me and listening. Give me a like, give me a comment. Give me a subscription, share me with your friends. Tell me where you disagree, where you agree. What are you looking out for in this draft? Let me know. I appreciate you. And until next time, take it easy, take it sleazy.